August 30, 1944. Nazi-occupied Slovenia. 7 men crouch in a ditch 60 meters past the barbed wire of Stalag 306. 3 years. Not a single prisoner has escaped this camp alive. These 7 just did. Ralph Churches, 25 years old, Australian, should be running toward the partisan rendezvous point. He isn't. He stands frozen, eyes locked on the watchtowers behind him. In his pocket sits a photograph of his wife, Ronte, creased from 3 years of desperate handling. On the back, her handwriting. ___, quote, _0, ___. What unfolds from this moment becomes the largest successful prisoner of war escape of the entire Second World War. More men freed than the Great Escape, more brought home breathing, and almost no one has ever heard of it. Why would a bank clerk turn his back on freedom? And how did he achieve the impossible? May 1941. The Greek coastline. Allied forces are crumbling beneath the Nazi blitzkrieg. Whole divisions scatter in chaos while German aircraft own the sky. Ralph Churches, a 22-year-old bank teller from Adelaide, enlisted barely 8 months prior, stands on a thin ribbon of beach with 6 other Australians. Together, they watch the last evacuation ship shrink against the horizon. Its outline fades, swallowed by smoke and distance. Around them, abandoned trucks burn. Ammunition cooks off in dull, rhythmic pops. The sea gives nothing back. They have been left behind. The 7 men uncover a rotting fishing dinghy half buried in sand. Its hull is split, worm-eaten. They stuff the cracks with rags ripped from uniforms, seal the seams with tar scraped off wreckage. Under darkness, they shove it into the water. Crete lies nearly 100 kilometers across open Aegean Sea, patrolled by German aircraft and naval vessels. For 2 weeks, they row through the night and vanish by day, hauling the boat into sea caves and rocky coves. They drink rainwater caught in helmets, chew raw fish, ration hope with the same discipline as food. Day 15. Exhaustion carved into every face. A German patrol boat cuts them off just 3 kilometers from Crete. Rifles come up. Orders crack through the salt air. The war ends for Ralph Churches before he ever squeezes a trigger. The Germans load their prisoners into cattle cars heading north. No water, no sanitation, no space to sit or lie flat. 6 days, the train crawls across Europe while men collapse from dehydration and heat. When someone drops and doesn't rise, guards drag the body to the door and hurl it onto the tracks. The train doesn't slow. By the time survivors stagger out at Maribor in occupied Slovenia, nearly 1 in 10 of Ralph's fellow prisoners has died from the transport alone. The rest look decades older than they are. Stalag 306 serves one purpose: repairing rail lines that Allied bombers keep tearing apart. Every morning at 600 hours, guards march prisoners to work sites at gunpoint. 12 hours of hauling steel rails, filling bomb craters, packing frozen earth with broken tools. Every evening, the survivors drag themselves back through the gates. Their reward? 200 grams of black bread, less than half what a human body needs to stay alive. Within 6 weeks, Ralph can count each of his own ribs. But the horror that robs Ralph of sleep isn't his own starvation. Through the wire of the neighboring compound, he watches hundreds of Soviet prisoners standing motionless in the mud. The Germans consider Slavic prisoners unworthy of even the pretense of work. They are being starved on purpose. Ralph watches those men become skeletons, watches them fold into the mud, one by one, and never stand again. In 14 months, Ralph Churches will stand at that barbed wire fence, free, facing a choice that will define everything he is. But first, he has to become someone capable of making it. Ralph possesses one weapon against despair: his mind. Languages come naturally to him. If he masters German, he becomes useful. Useful prisoners sometimes survive. A Slovenian farm boy delivers vegetables to the camp twice a week. The boy cannot read. Ralph bribes him with cigarette rations to smuggle in German newspapers. Then, Ralph teaches the boy to recognize letters through pantomime, acting out headlines until both of them can stumble through a sentence. One night, a guard catches Ralph with a folded newspaper tucked inside his mattress. Ralph's heart nearly stops. Discovery means solitary confinement, beatings, possibly death. But the guard only scans the headline, grunts, and walks on. He assumes the Australian is saving it for the latrine. Nothing more. Ralph lies rigid for hours afterward, breathing shallow, the paper still flattened against his ribs. He knows exactly how close he came to vanishing. Night after night, Ralph mouths German vocabulary in the barracks' darkness, whispering words until they bleed into his dreams. He listens, repeats, memorizes. Within 4 months, the Australian bank clerk holds real conversations with his captors, answering questions, understanding jokes, catching threats before they leave a German mouth. The camp commandant takes notice. Impressed by an English speaker who absorbed German faster than most university students, he appoints Ralph the official camp interpreter. The prisoners elect him their spokesman, the Vertrauensmann. Suddenly, Ralph stands in the commandant's office, negotiating extra rations, arguing to keep sick men off work details, and later, burying those he cannot save. The Germans call him Herr Churches. The Australians call him something else. In Adelaide slang, a South Australian is a crow-eater. Ralph is the only South Australian in the camp. While the crow smiles and translates, the question hangs in the air. What is he building behind the commandant's back? How does a prisoner construct an escape network under the muzzles of armed guards? By 1943, Ralph had buried 47 men. He recorded each name and serial number in a small notebook, careful handwriting arranged in neat columns, as though he were logging a debt rather than the dead. Every entry hardened a single conviction. Waiting for liberation was not patience, it was surrender. The Allies were winning the war, yes, but winning it slowly. At the current mortality rate, half the camp would be in the ground before any Allied soldier ever reached Slovenia. Ralph tried twice to escape alone. The first time, he wedged himself beneath sacks of potatoes inside a supply truck. He rode nearly 2 kilometers before a guard spotted movement and hauled him out at gunpoint. The second time, he crawled under a loose section of fence, made it 5 kilometers into the forest. Then dogs caught his scent and led a patrol straight to him. Each failure delivered the same punishment. 7 days in a concrete cell without light, half rations of bread and water. A beating that left bruises blooming across his body for weeks. But pain was not what stopped Ralph from trying again. Arithmetic did. A lone escapee in Nazi-occupied Yugoslavia. No papers, no contacts, no maps, had a survival window measured in hours. Patrols too dense, borders too distant. Alone, escape was not bravery. It was simply a slower form of suicide. Everything shifted in late 1943 when a new prisoner arrived. Freddie Russell, a New Zealander, carried a secret that altered the equation entirely. Freddie was captured only weeks before. Before his capture, he fought alongside the Yugoslav partisans, the guerrilla resistance waging a shadow war against the Nazis for 2 years. Freddie knows things: hidden trails through the mountains, coded signals to reach partisan cells, the location of a secret airstrip where Allied planes touch down at night to evacuate fugitives. But Freddie's intelligence comes with a problem. The escape routes exist, yet they demand resources, guides, food, safe houses, and above all, trust. The partisans will not risk their networks for random escapees stumbling through the woods. Ralph grasps the logic immediately. He must make contact before any escape attempt, not after. He must build the pipeline first, then fill it with men. Over the next 8 months, Ralph constructed an underground network far more intricate than anything the Germans believed possible. His position as interpreter gave him movement beyond the wire, escorting work details, accompanying sick prisoners to doctors in town, translating paperwork no one bothered to verify. On these trips, he began leaving coded messages at drop points Freddie had identified. A blacksmith in Maribor agreed to forge identity papers. A farmer 10 kilometers south would shelter escapees in his barn. A priest quietly relayed messages through his parish network. Link by link, Ralph assembled a fragile chain stretching from the camp gates to an Allied airstrip 160 kilometers away. In 6 weeks, Ralph Churches will guide 103 men across those mountains. But which 3 will he lose along the way? And what will it cost him to kneel beside a dying man he promised to bring home? By August 1944, the pipeline was operational. Ralph selected 6 men for the first escape: Freddie Russell, a British sergeant named Tom Price, and 4 others chosen for their physical condition, their discipline, their stamina. On the night of August 29th, they sliced through the wire with shears the camp blacksmith had smuggled in. They dissolved into the forest. By dawn, they reached the first partisan checkpoint. The system held. Ralph Churches had pulled off the impossible. He had broken free of Stalag 306. Now, he stood at the tree line, a free man. The route home, charted and waiting. The partisans pressed him forward. Every calculation, logical, statistical, rational, pointed one direction: go. But behind him, past the wire, more than 100 men still waited. 3 years of planning had led to this moment. Could he actually walk away? And if he turned back, what kind of man voluntarily returns to a place engineered to destroy him? Ralph Churches tells the partisans he is going back. The guerrilla commander stares at him. Back into the camp. Back through the wire he just cut. Back into a machine designed to erase men. They warn him there will be no second chance. If caught, he will be shot. Not imprisoned, not beaten, executed. German reprisals have already begun in response to partisan activity. Any escaped prisoner recaptured in the zone will be classified as a saboteur and dealt with accordingly. Ralph listens without argument. He thanks them, turns, and vanishes into the trees. He reaches the perimeter of Stalag 306 before dawn and waits among the shadows, counting steps, counting seconds. He knows the patrol rotation from memory. 3 years of captivity burned it into his mind. At 300 hours, a 30-second gap opens between guards. Ralph crawls through the cut wire, sprints across open ground, and slides through the barracks door. He rolls into darkness as though he never left. No one suspects he spent the night among armed partisans. By morning, he is back in his role as interpreter, translating orders, answering questions, maintaining the mask of obedience. Inside, everything is different. He is running a double game now, more dangerous than anything he has attempted before. By night, he moves through the barracks whispering, identifying men who can be trusted, men who can hold secrets, men who will not crack under pressure. Over the next 6 weeks, the plan crystallizes. Ralph organizes prisoners into groups of 12, each assigned a departure window and a guide positioned at the first checkpoint. He distributes forged papers, civilian clothes smuggled in piece by piece, crude maps drawn from Freddie Russell's intelligence. The partisans position food caches along the route. The timing must be precise. Once the first group escapes, the Germans will know something is wrong. Every group after faces tighter security, more patrols, greater risk. Zero margin for error. October 10th, 1944. The first group cuts through the wire at midnight and disappears into blackness. 24 hours later, the second follows, then the third. By October 13th, nearly 50 men have slipped out of Stalag 306, and the Germans still have not noticed. Daily headcounts remain correct because Ralph manipulates the records, marking escaped men as transferred or hospitalized in town. On October 15th, a German officer conducts a surprise inspection. He realizes a quarter of the camp has vanished. The alarm goes up. Search parties flood the forest. Dogs strain at their leashes. For the prisoners still inside the wire, the window appears to have slammed shut. But hidden in the camp latrine, wrapped in oilcloth, a second set of wire cutters. Ralph has scouted an alternate route, a drainage culvert beneath the eastern fence emptying into a creek bed. That night, while Germans search west, Ralph leads the remaining men east. 47 prisoners crawl through the culvert, wade through waist-deep water, and surface beyond the perimeter. 103 escaped prisoners now scatter across the Slovenian mountains. Small groups, no formation, all moving toward a rendezvous point none of them have ever laid eyes on. Between them and freedom, 160 kilometers of enemy territory. Snow-choked passes, roaming German patrols. And a clock ticking down to 0. How long could Ralph keep deceiving the Germans before someone noticed the pattern? And when they did, would his decision to go back condemn him alone, or everyone still trapped behind the wire? October 16th, 1944. The march begins. At first light, Ralph sorts the escapees into columns of 20, each column assigned to a partisan guide who carries the mountains in his memory, not on paper. The men look nothing like soldiers anymore. They wear patchwork civilian coats, stolen German uniforms flipped inside out, scarves torn from blankets. Some have boots pulled off farmhouse doorsteps or stripped from dead soldiers. Many have nothing but rags wound around their feet, cinched tight with wire. What they carry is barely enough. Hard bread already blooming with mold. Raw potatoes clawed from frozen fields. A few tins of meat meant to stretch across 100 men for 2 weeks. No one complains. Complaints cost energy. Energy is the one currency they've already spent. For 3 days, luck rides with them. The partisans thread them along goat trails and logging paths the Germans never bother to watch. Patrols sweep west, while the columns push east. They move by night, 15 kilometers at a stretch, and vanish by day into barns, caves, abandoned shepherd huts. Men who haven't smiled in years start whispering about food, eggs, bread slathered in butter, real coffee, tiny fantasies that keep dead legs churning forward. For a moment, it feels like all of them might actually make it. Then the weather turns. A blizzard crashes down from the Alps. Temperatures plunge below freezing. Snow swallows the trails. The column slows to a crawl. Men, hollowed out by years of malnutrition, start dropping. Ralph moves up and down the line, hauling men to their feet, shifting loads between shoulders, forcing those who want to lie down to keep walking. He knows the math. Anyone who stops will freeze solid within hours. For 1 hour on the blizzard's second night, Ralph considers turning back. Cold has soaked into his marrow. His lungs scorch with every breath. Behind him, men stumble, fall, cry out in the dark. He thinks of Ronte's photograph folded in his pocket. He could slip away, find a farmhouse, wait for spring. Then the British sergeant, Tom Price, sits down on a rock and refuses to move. His feet are black with frostbite. He tells Ralph to leave him. Ralph doesn't argue. He organizes a rotation instead. Men take turns carrying Price on their backs, passing him shoulder to shoulder through the snow. They carry him for 16 kilometers. On October 22nd, a New Zealand private named Arthur Simmons collapses. He cannot be revived. His heart has simply quit, worn through by cold and starvation. Ralph kneels beside the body, places a hand on Simmons' chest, finds nothing. Closes the man's eyes. There is no time to dig a grave. The column must keep moving. Ralph pulls out his camp notebook, writes Arthur Simmons' name, his serial number. Another debt, another name he will carry. The partisans guide the column over the poor mountain range, through passes so narrow the men walk single file. German patrols crisscross the valleys below. Twice the escapees hear engines and throw themselves into snowbanks. Once a patrol passes within 50 meters. Ralph presses his face into the snow until his cheeks burn raw. The Germans move on. They see nothing. By October 28th, the column reaches the Sava River, swollen fat with autumn rains. The only bridge sits behind a German checkpoint. Moving 100 men across unseen is impossible. The partisans propose a different route. A ford 3 kilometers upstream. The water is shallow but fast, chest deep, freezing. Ralph asks for volunteers. 12 men step forward. They link arms and wade in. A current nearly rips them off their feet, but they reach the far bank. One by one, the rest follow in groups of 8. The crossing takes 4 hours. Every man makes it across, though several must be carried afterward, their legs numb and dead beneath them. 2 more men will not reach the airstrip. David Finch, a British corporal, falls from a cliff path in the darkness. George Murray, an Australian private, succumbs to pneumonia on the final night. On November 1st, 1944, the column reaches the rendezvous point, a hidden airstrip carved into liberated partisan territory, a flat